The air was thick with smoke and ash. Earth, once a thriving cradle of human civilization, now lay in ruins beneath the unrelenting assault of the Crivery, a race of alien conquerors whose ruthlessness knew no bounds. They were a force that had swept through the galaxy, leaving desolation in their wake. Earth had been their final target, the last bastion of resistance in a war they had been winning for years. Captain Zara Kincaid stood on the bridge of the Athena, staring at the fading blue orb that had once been home. She could hear the desperate clamor of her crew as they scrambled to prepare for their final mission. The Crivery had landed their invasion forces across Earth's continents, and their fleet hovered in orbit like a vulture waiting for the dying prey. Kincaid knew this was it, the last stand. "Report, Commander Brandt," she called, her voice cold but unwavering. Brandt, her loyal first officer, turned to face her, sweat running down his face. "We've sustained heavy damage, Captain. The Athena can take no more direct hits. We're down to 30% of our fighters, and the Crivery flagship, the Razor, is preparing to fire its main cannon. If they do, Earth will be lost." Kincaid clenched her fists. "We can't let them fire that weapon. We fight to the last." Her thoughts raced as the weight of their situation crushed down on her. The Crivery's flagship was formidable, armored and heavily shielded, with enough firepower to wipe out Earth's last stronghold in a single strike. The odds were impossibly stacked against them. Even if they launched everything they had left, it wouldn't be enough. They had no chance of winning this battle. But they did have one last card to play. "We don't have time," Kincaid muttered under her breath. She turned to Brandt, her eyes sharp with determination. "Initiate Protocol Omega. We will take down the Razor, no matter the cost." Brandt stared at her in disbelief. "Captain, you can't." "I'll be damned if I let these bastards win without making them pay," Kincaid snapped. She was already moving to the command console, typing in commands. "This is the only way, Commander. We have one ship, and we're going to use it." Brandt hesitated, the weight of the decision heavy on him. But he knew better than to argue with her now. He nodded grimly, pulling up the necessary data. Initiating Protocol Omega, preparing for maximum overload. The Athena's engines began to hum as the ship shifted into a final combat formation. The remaining human fleet had long since been destroyed, leaving the Athena as humanity's last hope. Kincaid's heart pounded in her chest, but her resolve was absolute. She glanced at the view screen, watching the massive Crivery warship grow larger with each passing second. "All hands, brace for impact," she ordered, her voice a steady command that cut through the tension on the bridge. "This is it, people. For Earth. For humanity. For our future." As the crew nodded, their faces grim but determined, the Athena made its move. In a final act of defiance, Kincaid ordered the ship to charge directly at the Razor. The Athena's weapon systems began firing in rapid succession, hammering the Crivery flagship with everything they had. But Kincaid knew it wouldn't be enough. Not in a conventional battle. At the last possible moment, the Athena began its final approach, engines straining against the odds. Kincaid activated the ship's core overload, a one-way ticket for her and the crew. The Athena's hull groaned under the strain as it surged forward, breaking through the Crivery defenses. For a brief moment, Kincaid felt a strange sense of peace, the peace of knowing that her sacrifice would matter, that the fight for humanity's survival would not go unnoticed. The explosion was colossal. A brilliant flash of light lit up the sky as the Athena collided with the Razor, both ships disintegrating in a cataclysmic burst of fire and energy. In that single moment, the Crivery flagship was destroyed, along with the last human warship. The galaxy would remember that moment, a final act of defiance. But as the Crivery fleet faltered and retreated, the legend of Captain Zara Kincaid began to take root. Humanity's sacrifice would become a myth, one that would inspire generations yet to come. The Crivery had retreated, leaving Earth to burn in the aftermath of their destructive campaign. The alien invaders, their plans to obliterate humanity thwarted in a single moment of unimaginable sacrifice, now focused on other worlds. But to the survivors of Earth, the story was only beginning. Months passed, and Earth's last survivors scattered across the stars, finding refuge on distant colonies, their homes reduced to ash. The human race had been all but erased, its final chapter written in blood and fire. Yet, amid the pain and desolation, something extraordinary began to stir. In the ruins of one of the few remaining human colonies, Lieutenant Eric Rios, a former officer aboard the Athena, sat alone in a small makeshift command center. His eyes were tired, his face lined with exhaustion, but there was a spark in his heart, a deep, burning anger that refused to die. It had been Rios who had helped maintain the ship's systems during its final mission. It had been his team that had followed Kincaid into that final battle. Now, with Earth gone, it was his duty to ensure that the sacrifice had meaning. He stared at a tattered holorecord, a last transmission from Captain Kincaid, one of the few that had survived the explosion. Her voice echoed through the room, a haunting reminder of the woman who had led humanity into the jaws of death with unflinching resolve. "This is Captain Zura Kincaid of the Athena. If you are hearing this, we've given everything for the survival of humanity. But we are not gone. We are a seed, and our sacrifice will be our legacy. For Earth, for the future, fight. Never give up." The message was a rallying cry, and it pierced the hearts of those who still remembered the true nature of humanity. Rios felt his pulse quicken as the last words of the fallen captain echoed in his mind. The people of Earth were scattered, broken, and lost, but the Martyr's Legion, as they would come to call themselves, would rise from the ashes. The first steps toward unity began in small, quiet ways. It was a secret meeting between former soldiers, exiled scientists, and civilians from across the galaxy, some from planets that had been too far removed from the war to have ever heard of humanity's struggles, others from worlds that had known Earth's history and felt its loss. It wasn't much at first, just a handful of survivors who had heard of Kincaid's final stand and found themselves inspired by the sacrifice of one woman who had defied impossible odds. But their unity was enough to spark the beginning of something larger. Rios took the lead. His voice, still carrying the weight of loss and anger, became the rallying call. "We will not fade into history. We will make them remember us. Every single one of us. Kincaid didn't die in vain. She gave us the spark we need, and we will fight to honor it." At first, their operations were small-scale, covert strikes against remnants of the Kriveri forces still scattered across the galaxy. They gathered intelligence, sabotage operations on Kriveri supply routes, and set up communication networks. Word of their resistance spread, slowly but surely, through the galaxy. Humanity's legend, Kincaid's legend, had already taken root in the hearts of those who believed in the cause. The Martyr's Legion grew, and with it, the unshakable belief that humanity was far from finished. The people who had once been on the fringes of galactic society were now forming alliances, forging bonds with species who had once turned a blind eye to the plight of humans. The Martyr's Legion was more than just a resistance group. It was a symbol. The spark of hope that Kincaid had ignited was now a fire that was beginning to spread. But with every step forward, danger loomed. The Kriveri were not a defeated enemy. They would return. And when they did, the Martyr's Legion would be ready. As Rios looked out at the stars, the weight of his responsibility hung heavy on his shoulders. The fight was just beginning, and though he couldn't have known it then, the legend of humanity's final martyr would soon become the foundation of a galaxy-wide resistance, one that would challenge the very foundations of power and change the course of history forever. The forgotten martyr, Captain Zura Kincaid, was no longer forgotten. Her sacrifice had planted the seeds of a rebellion that was destined to shake the galaxy to its core. As the Martyr's Legion gained momentum, the galaxy began to notice something strange. In the far reaches of the universe, stories spread about humanity's unexpected resilience and ingenuity. The Kriveri, who had assumed they were dealing with a broken and powerless species, soon found themselves underestimating the depths of humanity's adaptability and spirit. Lieutenant Eric Rios, now a leader within the Legion, felt the pressure mounting with every passing day. The fight had shifted from mere survival to a full-scale resistance. Humanity's fractured forces were slowly becoming a unified front. The once insignificant human resistance cells, scattered across the galaxy, had begun to consolidate into a formidable force, one that was learning to strike with precision and overwhelming force. Rios, now more determined than ever, knew their success would hinge on their ability to use the Crivery's own tactics against them. The Martyr's Legion had gathered a ragged crew of soldiers, engineers, and scientists from all corners of the galaxy, species who had once seen humanity as a nuisance or, at best, an irrelevant faction. They now recognized that the Crivery threat wasn't exclusive to humans. It was a threat to all life in the galaxy, and Rio's leadership, shaped by Kincaid's final words, had inspired them all to fight. But humanity brought something to the table that no other species had: a tenacity to adapt and innovate in the face of defeat. Humans had always thrived in difficult conditions, finding creative solutions to problems that seemed insurmountable. Where other races might surrender or negotiate, humanity fought on, and their adaptability made them dangerous. In one of the first significant raids organized by the Martyr's Legion, Rios led a strike against a Crivery supply convoy. The Crivery, expecting an easy victory over a small group of resistance fighters, found themselves utterly blindsided. Humanity's ability to improvise, coupled with the use of unconventional weaponry, turned the tide of the operation. Rios had a plan: take out the convoy's long-range communication and disrupt its weapon systems. It was simple, but it worked. With Crivery defenses scrambled, the humans unleashed their full force. The convoy's ships exploded in rapid succession, sending shockwaves through the Crivery forces. The victory was more than just tactical, it was symbolic. News of the ambush spread across the galaxy. If humanity could accomplish such a feat with nothing but scraps and the sheer will to survive, what more could they do? For the first time in years, whispers of hope began to spread. The Crivery were not invincible. Humanity's cunning, resourcefulness, and unyielding resolve were beginning to shine through. But it wasn't just in warfare that humans excelled. As the Martyr's Legion grew, its members quickly learned how to push the boundaries of technology, often incorporating salvaged Crivery equipment into their own designs. Humanity's knack for reverse engineering advanced alien tech was a game-changer. Scientists, many of whom had once worked in the shadows of their own world's military-industrial complex, now applied their knowledge in ways that no one had expected. They adapted Crivery energy shields to create new forms of armor for the Resistance, and human engineers crafted new types of weaponry, drawing on their knowledge of technology and warfare, but adding their own innovative twists. One of the most significant breakthroughs came from an unlikely source: a former civilian engineer named Elira Sol, who had worked in Earth's burgeoning space exploration program before the invasion. Using the Crivery's own energy manipulation devices, Sol managed to reverse engineer a new form of hyperdrive technology that would allow the Martyr's Legion to strike fast and hard, even in deep Crivery-controlled space. Her success not only proved humanity's technological prowess, but also gave the Martyr's Legion an edge it hadn't had before: speed. Now they could hit Crivery targets in a matter of hours, rather than days, and vanish before the enemy could retaliate. As Rios watched the Legion grow stronger, he felt a surge of pride. They had no more home to return to, no planet left to call their own. But they had something far more dangerous than any fleet or weapon: humanity's relentless ability to fight, to adapt, and to survive. The Crivery had underestimated them, but they would soon learn that humanity's true power lay not in its numbers, but in its heart. In the darkest corners of space, in hidden resistance outposts and abandoned war zones, the story of humanity's rise from the ashes became a myth. And soon, the Crivery would face the truth. Humanity was not done. It was only just beginning. Just as the Martyr's Legion began to believe victory was within reach, the Crivery returned. And this time, they were prepared. Rios and his allies had pushed deep into Krigari-controlled space, striking strategic targets, dismantling supply lines, and sabotaging their war machines. Humanity's momentum seemed unstoppable. The Martyr's Legion was no longer a scattered force of disparate rebels. It was a unified, strategic power capable of making even the Crivery tremble. But their success had not gone unnoticed. The Crivery, too, had been watching. It came without warning. One moment, the fleet of the Martyr's Legion was celebrating a victory, an ambush that had successfully decimated a Crivery war factory. The next moment, a dark shadow loomed overhead. It wasn't just one ship. It was an armada. The Crivery had learned from their previous mistakes. This time, they were ready. The fleet that descended upon the Legion's stronghold was unlike anything humanity had faced before. The Crivery flagship, Vorkoth's Judgment, had been reinforced with new weaponry and advanced tactics. Alongside it, a swarm of destroyers and dreadnoughts formed a ring around the Legion's position, blocking any route of escape or retreat. Rios stood at the heart of the command center, staring at the holographic display of the enemy fleet. His chest tightened with anxiety, but his mind remained sharp. They've adapted. They've learned. He muttered to himself, and they're ready to wipe us out. A voice crackled over the comms. Elira Sol, the engineer who had revolutionized their fleet's hyperdrive technology. Eric, the fleet is too vast. We can't fight this head-on. They'll destroy us if we engage in open battle. Rios nodded grimly. He had no illusions about the odds. It was clear that the Crivery had come with the sole intention of ending humanity's rebellion once and for all. Their message was simple: surrender or die. Time to go for the jugular, Rios said, his voice cold with determination. We fought too hard for too long to give up now. We've got to strike their core. The core of the Crivery invasion was a planet called Vorkoth Prime, a heavily fortified world that served as the home base of their most powerful fleet. Rios and his commanders knew that taking it down would cripple the Crivery's war efforts. But getting to the heart of the enemy's strongest defenses was no small task. It would require a surgical strike, fast enough to avoid total destruction. In a bold gamble, the Martyr's Legion launched a high-risk assault on a Crivery defense outpost, hoping to draw away enough of the enemy forces to make a direct attack on Vorkoth Prime possible. The strategy was risky. Far too many unknowns were involved, and it depended entirely on the Crivery underestimating them. But it was their only hope. Rios led the charge, alongside a small but elite team of fighters, each one handpicked for their exceptional skill and loyalty. They hit the Crivery outpost with brutal precision, crippling communications and weapon systems in a series of deadly raids. For hours, they pushed back the alien forces, allowing their main fleet to slip under the radar and approach the heavily fortified planet. But the Crivery weren't fooled. Their counterattack came swift and deadly. As Rios and his team infiltrated the planet's outer defenses, the full force of the Crivery fleet descended upon them. It was a massacre. Explosions rocked the battlefield, and the air was thick with the acrid smell of burning metal. The Martyr's Legion's fighters engaged in dogfights above the surface, while Rios and his team made their way toward the planet's core, where the Crivery kept their most devastating weapon, a super weapon capable of annihilating entire systems. The final assault was a brutal push. Rios knew that the chances of survival were slim, but as he watched the destruction unfold, he felt the weight of Captain Kincaid's sacrifice pushing him forward. This was their moment. Win or lose, humanity's fight would be remembered. The team reached the heart of the Crivery facility. But just as they were about to disable the superweapon, a massive explosion sent shockwaves through the ground. The Crivery had unleashed their most terrifying tactic, planetary bombardment. As the ground trembled beneath them, Rios made a split-second decision. He activated a secondary failsafe, a last-ditch effort to detonate the planet's core and take the superweapon with it. It was a suicide mission, and they knew it. "Get out of here now," Rios yelled to his team as the countdown began. But the explosion was already in motion. The Crivery had underestimated humanity's spirit once again. Rios' final words echoed through the facility as it was consumed by a cataclysmic blast, sending ripples through the galaxy. The Martyr's Legion had struck a blow, but it was a costly one. Rios and his team were lost, their fate sealed in a final act of defiance. And as the Crivery retreated, defeated but still alive, the galaxy knew that humanity's war was far from over. The legend of Captain Kinkid, and now Rios, would continue to inspire those who fought on. Their sacrifice would be the spark for the rebellion that was only beginning. The explosion at Vorkuth Prime sent shockwaves throughout the galaxy, its reverberations felt even in the most distant corners of Crivery-controlled space. It had been a suicide mission, but it had accomplished what the Martyr's Legion had set out to do. The Crivery's superweapon was destroyed, and with it, the heart of their war machine. The Crivery forces were momentarily stunned, reeling from the loss of such a strategic asset. But the victory came at a devastating cost. The Martyr's Legion had lost many of its most seasoned fighters, and the death of Rios, the charismatic leader who had rallied humanity to fight, left a void that seemed impossible to fill. With Earth already lost, and now their greatest leader gone, many feared that the Martyr's Legion might fracture, its survivors scattered and demoralized. Yet, even in the face of overwhelming grief and loss, humanity's indomitable will to survive would not be extinguished. Among the surviving members of the Martyr's Legion was Illyra Sol, the brilliant engineer who had revolutionized their technology. She was one of the few who had seen Rios' final moments, and the weight of that loss bore heavily on her. But it also ignited a fire within her. If humanity was going to survive this war, it couldn't rely on the bravery of a single person. It needed to be more. It needed to be a movement. "We can't let them win," Illyra said, staring out into the void of space. "We need to make sure humanity's sacrifice means something." Her words were more than just a rallying cry. They were a vision. Humanity's future didn't lie in the hands of any one person. It lay in the hearts of the many who had fought alongside Kincaid and Rios, in the minds of those who refused to believe that their species was destined for extinction. It was time to build something greater, something that could outlast the ashes of the past. With Illyra at the helm, the Martyr's Legion began to rebuild. But this time, it would not be a ragtag group of scattered resistance cells. It would become an organized, galaxy-wide coalition of human and alien factions determined to overthrow the Crivery and restore peace to the galaxy. To do so, Illyra knew they would need more than just firepower. They would need allies. It began slowly, almost imperceptibly. At first, it was a handful of small systems, planets that had either escaped Crivery occupation or had managed to withstand their brutal assault. These planets, though they had no direct stake in humanity's fight, saw the Crivery for what they were, an existential threat to all life. As word of the Legion's success spread, more and more systems sent representatives to the Legion's command centers. There were former enemies, former allies, and species that had once been neutral, but they all shared the same goal now. Illyra worked tirelessly to forge these fragile alliances, understanding that the road ahead would be long and filled with political maneuvering. Trust would need to be earned, old wounds healed, and promises kept. It wasn't easy, but humanity's reputation, its courage, ingenuity, and unwavering resolve, was beginning to win over those who had once doubted them. In the heart of the Martyr's Legion's new flagship, the Resilience, a small council of leaders began to take shape. Illyra, now one of the most influential voices in the movement, sat at the head of the table. Her hands were steady as she spoke, despite the uncertainty that still lingered in her heart. "We faced the worst of it. The Crivery aren't invincible," she began, her voice cutting through the tense silence of the room. "We've destroyed their most powerful weapon, and we've shown that their empire is not unbreakable. We've proven that humanity is a force to be reckoned with. But we need more than just a handful of ships. We need to be a united front. We need to hit them where it hurts. The Council, a mix of human and alien representatives, nodded in agreement. Elira's plan was clear. They would launch a series of coordinated strikes across Crivery space, targeting critical infrastructure, communication networks, and weaponry. Each blow would weaken their enemy, piece by piece, until the Crivery were forced to face the true strength of the Martyr's Legion. We don't stop until they're driven out of our galaxy, Elira continued, her eyes fierce with determination. Humanity fought for Earth. Now we fight for the future of every species under Crivery rule. The room was silent for a moment before a single voice broke through the tension. It was an alien commander, one of the first to join the Legion after the destruction of Vorkuth Prime. His species, the Vexor, had been enslaved by the Crivery for centuries. His loyalty was unwavering, but there was still a hint of uncertainty in his eyes. "You talk about the future of all species," he said carefully, "but what about humanity's future? What happens when the Crivery are gone?" Elira looked at him, her gaze steady. "We fight for freedom, for the right to live without fear. And when this is all over, we'll rebuild. Together. Humanity doesn't just want to survive. We want to thrive. And we want the galaxy to thrive with us." The words hung in the air, and the room seemed to hold its breath. For the first time in a long while, there was a sense of hope, a belief that the fight could be won, not just by humanity, but by all those who stood with them. The galaxy was not lost. It had simply been waiting for the spark of rebellion to catch fire. And in that moment, humanity was no longer just a species on the brink of extinction. It was the heart of the galaxy's resistance, a symbol of defiance, unity, and hope. Under Elira Sol's leadership, the Martyr's Legion had evolved from a disparate group of rebels to an organized coalition of human and alien forces, all united by a single cause: the defeat of the Crivery. The blows they had struck had been devastating, shattering supply lines, crippling Crivery infrastructure, and sowing confusion throughout the enemy's ranks. But with each victory, the Crivery adapted, and the stakes grew higher. They were no longer just fighting for survival. They were fighting to ignite the spark of a full-scale revolution. Now, Elira stood before a massive holographic map of the galaxy in the Legion's new command center aboard the Resilience. Around her, the leaders of the various factions gathered, including the Vexor commander who had questioned her leadership, as well as representatives from the Salaxians, a fierce reptilian race who had long been oppressed by the Crivery. The room buzzed with tension and anticipation. "Where do we strike next?" The Vexor commander, Jareth, asked, his tone laced with both hope and caution. He knew the risks as well as anyone. The Crivery were not an enemy to be underestimated. Elira's finger hovered over a key system on the map. Helix 9, a Crivery-controlled planet that was rumored to house their most secretive weapon, a new breed of war machine that could turn the tide of the war in their favor. Its existence had been confirmed through reconnaissance, but no one knew exactly what it was, only that it had the potential to annihilate entire fleets. "We hit Helix 9, Elira said, her voice unwavering. "We don't know exactly what they're hiding there, but if we strike fast, we can take it before they can unleash it. We have to destroy whatever it is before it becomes a weapon against us." The room went silent, the weight of her words sinking in. The mission would be dangerous, perhaps suicidal. If the weapon on Helix 9 was even half as powerful as the rumors suggested, the Martyr's Legion would be facing its greatest challenge yet. One of the Salaxians, a battle-hardened general named Vala, spoke up. "The Crivery are smart. They'll have traps. They'll make us think we have the advantage, but it will be a setup." "I know," Elira replied, "which is why we'll hit them from multiple angles. A diversion in their outer defense grid, a small strike team to infiltrate their underground complexes, and the main fleet will move in once we've destabilized their defenses. If we play our cards right, we'll blindside them." The strategy was risky, but it was their only option. Time was running out, and if the Crivery succeeded in developing their superweapon, the galaxy would fall into a new age of tyranny. Illyra wasn't about to let that happen. The next few days were filled with preparation and tension. Fighters were retrofitted with new weaponry. Soldiers, human and alien alike, trained for the raid that would take them deep into enemy territory. The Martyr's Legion was united, but cracks still lingered beneath the surface. Some of the factions were uneasy, wondering if they could truly trust humans with their shared future. But Illyra knew that trust would come with time. They were fighting for the same thing, a future where they weren't at the mercy of the Crivery. As the fleet assembled in the blackness of space, the tension was palpable. Every ship, every fighter, every soldier knew what was at stake. The Resilience moved to the front of the formation, its newly upgraded systems ready for battle. Illyra stood on the bridge, staring out at the stars. In the distance, Helix 9 loomed, a dark, forbidding planet, its surface shrouded in the mystery of what lay beneath. "We're ready," a voice called from behind her. It was Captain Norik, the leader of one of the human battalions. "The fleet's in position, Commander Saul. Just give the word." Illyra's heart pounded, but her mind was clear. She wasn't the same person she had been when she first took up the mantle of leadership. She had been shaped by loss, by sacrifice, and by the unyielding will to protect what was left of humanity. She had learned from Kincaid's example, and now it was her turn to lead the charge. "All units, prepare for the assault," Illyra ordered, her voice steady and commanding. "We strike now." The fleet surged forward, cutting through the stars with deadly precision. The Crivery, unaware of the full scope of the Legion's plan, were caught off guard by the sudden offensive. The initial strikes were swift, coordinated, and brutal, smashing through the outer defenses of Helix 9 with surgical precision. The diversion worked. The Crivery scrambled to regroup, but it was already too late. Illyra's heart raced as the Resilience entered the atmosphere of Helix 9, the planet's surface riddled with enemy bases. Fighter jets screamed past her ship as the ground forces landed, chaos erupting on the surface. The strike team, led by the now-promoted Commander Jareth, descended into the underground bunkers where the Crivery's most secretive weapon was rumored to be housed. But as Illyra watched the battle unfold, a chilling realization struck her. This wasn't just a raid. This was the beginning of something much larger. The Crivery weren't just defending Helix 9. They were preparing for a war unlike anything humanity or their allies had ever seen. The ground shook as a massive explosion rippled through the planet's surface. Illyra's eyes widened as she watched a colossal ship, unlike anything the Crivery had ever deployed before, rise from the depths of the planet. It was more than just a weapon. It was a symbol of the Crivery's desperation. "All units, fall back," Illyra ordered, her voice filled with urgency. This mission just got a lot harder. The Crivery had unleashed their ace in the hole, and the Martyr's Legion was about to face a battle that would change everything. The sight of the Crivery's superweapon was enough to make the hearts of even the most battle-hardened soldiers falter. Rising from the depths of Helix 9, the massive vessel loomed over the battlefield, a monstrosity of jagged metal and flickering, energy-sapping conduits. The Vorkoth Ascendant, as Illyra would later come to know it, was unlike anything they had ever seen. An enormous dreadnought, its hull covered in energy shields and lined with weapons capable of obliterating entire fleets with a single strike. "This is not a weapon," Illyra muttered, her voice barely audible over the din of the chaos unfolding outside. "This is an executioner." The Martyr's Legion had calculated the odds, and the odds were grim. The Vorkoth Ascendant was far more than the Crivery had ever used against them. It wasn't just a ship, it was the culmination of everything they had learned from their previous failures, and it was built with one sole purpose: to crush humanity's rebellion once and for all. With the Vorkoth Ascendant now in play, Illyra knew they had no choice but to fight. Their original mission was clear: destroy the Crivery's hidden weapon and cripple their war machine. But the destruction of Helix 9's underground facility, combined with the emergence of the superweapon, now forced their hand. If they didn't stop the Vorkoth Ascendant, they wouldn't just lose this battle, they would lose the war. Captain Norik, get the Resilience out of here. Elira shouted as the command ship swerved to avoid a barrage of energy blasts from the Kriveri ship's weapons. We need to buy time for the ground team to regroup. Norik's face was grim as he nodded, the weight of the decision hanging heavy between them. The Martyr's Legion wasn't equipped to take on a ship of that scale, not without reinforcements, and not without a solid plan. But Elira wasn't about to run, not after everything they'd fought for. She turned to her communications officer. Send the distress signal. Tell every available fleet to rally at Helix 9. Now, Elira's fingers danced over the command console, initiating a transmission that would echo across the galaxy. The fate of their rebellion hung in the balance. They needed reinforcements, desperately. Meanwhile, on the ground, Commander Jareth's team had encountered the first line of Kriveri defense near the superweapon's core. Their mission was to disable the ship's power systems, but the appearance of the Vorkoth Ascendant had complicated everything. The Kriveri forces had shifted from defensive to full-scale counterattack, cutting off their escape routes. In the heat of battle, Jareth found himself facing a squadron of Kriveri elite troops. He had seen the horrors they were capable of before, but the battle ahead would be like nothing he'd ever faced. With his rifle aimed squarely at the oncoming alien forces, he barked orders to his team. We can't let them reach the power core. Hold the line. We'll die here before we let them take this planet. His voice was steady, but the weight of his words was undeniable. Every soldier knew that if the Kriveri secured Helix 9, they wouldn't just lose a battle, they would lose everything. The galaxy would fall into darkness, and the sacrifices of the Martyr's Legion would be for nothing. Meanwhile, Elira watched the chaos unfold on the battlefield, her mind racing. The Vorkoth Ascendant's energy pulses tore into the Legion's fleet, dismantling ships as though they were made of paper. The ground troops were already fighting for survival. She had to make a decision, quickly. The distress call had gone out, but the reinforcements wouldn't arrive in time to save them all. There was one chance left, a desperate gambit. Elira's eyes scanned the tactical map, locating the main energy core powering the Kriveri dreadnought. The plan was simple. Overload the core with a cascade of high-powered energy surges, creating a massive explosion that could disable the superweapon long enough to cripple its defenses. The only problem, to carry it out, she would need to infiltrate the enemy ship. The Resilience wouldn't stand a chance against the Vorkoth Ascendant in a direct confrontation. But if she could get close enough and plant a destabilizing charge inside its main power conduit, they might be able to take it down. Elira's heart raced, but she knew this was the only option left. The stakes couldn't be higher. She turned toward Norik, who was at the helm of the Resilience, attempting to hold off the incoming barrage from the Kriveri. "Prepare the fighters," Elira ordered. "We're going in." Captain Norik looked at her in disbelief. "Are you insane? You can't just waltz into a warship like that." "We don't have a choice," Elira said firmly. "If we don't stop that ship, we're done. This is the only shot we have left." She motioned to the rest of the crew, assembling a small strike team of elite fighters and engineers. With their ship's weapons systems primed, they would make their way to the heart of the Vorkoth Ascendant. As the fleet continued to battle around Helix 9, Elira and her team prepared for their most dangerous mission yet. The Resilience would provide cover fire, giving the strike team the time they needed to board the Kriveri ship and plant the charge. The countdown had begun. The fate of humanity and the future of the galaxy rested on a single strike. With one final breath, Elira turned to face her team. "Let's show them what humanity is really made of." The strike team surged forward, their ships weaving through the chaos of battle. The Resilience cannons fired in coordinated bursts, blasting Kriveri warships into oblivion, clearing the path for Elira's team to approach the Vorkoth Ascendant. The dreadnought loomed before them like an unyielding titan, its energy shields flickering with deadly intent. It was a ship built for war, designed to crush all in its path. But Illyra's resolve was unwavering. This was humanity's last stand, and they would not go quietly into the dark. "Illyra, we've got incoming." Norik's voice crackled over the comms. "I can't hold them off forever." "I don't need forever," Illyra replied, her voice tight with focus. "Just long enough for us to get on board." As the team's fighters closed in on the Vorkuth Ascendant, the ship's massive guns began to charge, their deadly beams lighting up the vastness of space. Illyra's hands tightened on the controls, urging her fighter forward. Her mission was simple: get on that ship, reach the power core, and plant the destabilizing charge. Everything else was secondary. "Prepare for docking," Illyra ordered, her voice calm despite the storm of gunfire and explosions around her. The team's fighters locked onto a section of the Vorkuth Ascendant's hull, magnetic grapples pulling them into position on one of the dreadnought's outer platforms. They had no time to waste. If they hesitated, they wouldn't make it past the ship's heavily fortified exterior. The strike team disembarked, their boots hitting the cold, metallic surface with a soft thud. Their suits, reinforced with the latest human technology, provided them with vital protection as they sprinted toward the ship's main access point. The dreadnought's defenses were already responding, automated turrets swiveling into position to fire upon them. But the team was fast, too fast. With a series of well-placed explosives, they'd breached the outer doors and made their way into the belly of the beast. "Keep moving," Illyra shouted, leading the charge down the narrow corridors. The walls were lined with Crivery soldiers, and the air was thick with the hum of energy shields and the stench of blood. The enemy forces were relentless, but so were they. The strike team had been through hell before, and this would be no different. They fought through wave after wave of Crivery soldiers, their guns spitting death with every pull of the trigger. Illyra's mind was sharp, calculating each movement, each step. They couldn't afford to waste time. The deeper they went, the more ferocious the resistance became. The Vorkuth Ascendant was an inferno of chaos, but Illyra's team cut through it like a blade through cloth. The path to the power core was fraught with peril, but the team's will was stronger than any obstacle. They pushed forward, unrelenting, their goal clear. At last, they reached the core room, a massive chamber filled with pulsating energy conduits and shimmering power grids. The core itself was a complex, jagged structure of Crivery technology, glowing with an otherworldly light. Illyra wasted no time. "Plant the charge," she ordered, her voice steady. Her engineer, a young human named Kalen, moved swiftly, setting the device in place. It was a delicate procedure, one misstep, and they would all be vaporized in a flash of energy. Kalen worked with practiced precision, his hands moving like clockwork. But even as he finished, alarms began to blare throughout the ship. The Crivery knew they were here. "We're out of time," Illyra shouted. "Let's go." The team turned to flee, but the doors to the core room slammed shut with a thunderous crash. They were trapped. "No choice now," Illyra muttered. "Everyone, fall back to the ships. We'll fight our way out." The team made their way back through the dreadnought's hallways, fighting off Crivery soldiers who seemed to pour from every direction. It was a brutal, chaotic escape, but Illyra and her team fought with the desperation of those who had nothing left to lose. They knew the countdown was ticking. If they didn't make it out in time, the Vorkuth Ascendant would be their tomb. The team finally reached the docking bay, where their ships waited. As they climbed into their fighters, Illyra's heart pounded. The charge was set, but the explosion wouldn't be immediate. They had minutes, maybe less. "Ready?" she asked, her voice tight with the weight of the moment. "We're ready," Norik replied, his voice steady despite the chaos. Illyra nodded and gave the order. The fighters launched, speeding away from the Vorkuth Ascendant, just as the countdown reached its final seconds. The explosion that followed was cataclysmic, an eruption of light and fire that tore through the heart of the Crivery dreadnought. The shockwave rippled outward, disintegrating Crivery ships in its wake and sending the once mighty Vorkoth Ascendant crashing into Helix 9's surface. For a moment, everything was still. The battlefield fell silent, as if the galaxy itself held its breath. Then, the reality set in. The Crivery fleet was in disarray. The superweapon had been destroyed, and the tide of the war had shifted in humanity's favor. The Martyr's Legion had won. Elira's eyes lingered on the wreckage of the Vorkoth Ascendant, her heart heavy with the weight of sacrifice. Many had given everything for this victory, and though they had triumphed, the cost had been high. The fleet began to regroup, the survivors battered but resolute. In that moment, Elira knew that humanity had forged its place in the galaxy. They had proven that they were more than just survivors. They were a force to be reckoned with. And as the remnants of the Crivery fleet retreated into the distance, Elira's soul looked ahead, knowing that this was only the beginning. The fight wasn't over. The galaxy was vast, and their enemies were many. But humanity had found its voice. It would not be silenced. The galaxy had just begun to change, and humanity would lead the way.